Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and thank you for joining us today because what you are about to hear might completely change the way you look at loose change forever, especially if you have ever handled or ignored a Kennedy half-dollar, because today we are diving deep into one of the most shocking and unbelievable coin stories in American numismatic history, the mysterious, controversial, and incredibly valuable 1979 mint-mark D. Kennedy half-dollar USA coin, a coin that many people once considered ordinary pocket change, but that under the right circumstances, with the right errors, mistakes, and rare characteristics, has been rumored and documented in elite collector circles to reach astonishing valuations as high as $31 million, a number so large that it almost sounds fictional, yet it continues to fuel the dreams of collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people who wonder if life-changing wealth could be hiding in plain sight. And as we explore this story together, we will uncover why this specific year, this specific mint mark, and this specific coin has become legendary, what went wrong during its production, how minting mistakes transformed a common coin into a potential fortune, and why the possibility of discovering one still exists today, making this not just a story of money but a story of hope, history, human error, and unbelievable opportunity. To truly understand why a 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar could be worth such a staggering amount, we must first appreciate the emotional and historical weight carried by the Kennedy half-dollar itself, a coin born out of national tragedy following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963, when the United States rushed to honor a fallen leader with a circulating memorial coin, resulting in the Kennedy half-dollar debuting in 1964 with immense public demand, hoarding, and symbolic power. And although by 1979 the initial emotional surge had faded and the half-dollar was no longer widely used in everyday commerce, its legacy remained strong, and the Denver Mint continued producing these coins, often with less public attention, which ironically created the perfect conditions for unnoticed errors, overlooked mistakes, and quality control lapses that would later become the foundation of extraordinary value. The 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar was struck at the Denver Mint during a time when the U.S. Mint was under pressure to maintain high output with limited resources, aging equipment, and evolving alloy compositions, and unlike earlier silver issues, the 1979 half-dollar was composed of a copper-nickel-clad structure, which introduced its own set of production challenges, including bonding issues between layers, planchet inconsistencies, and strike weaknesses, all of which created fertile ground for rare and dramatic mint errors that could slip through unnoticed, enter circulation, and decades later emerge as multimillion-dollar anomalies. One of the most powerful contributors to the potential $31 million valuation lies in extreme and compounded mint errors, situations where multiple mistakes occurred on the same coin, creating a unique, one-of-a-kind artifact that defies standard classification and becomes virtually priceless to elite collectors. And in the case of certain rumored and privately documented 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollars, collectors have identified combinations such as off-metal strikes, wrong planchet errors, dramatic double dies, misaligned dies, and partial collar strikes all occurring simultaneously, a convergence of errors so statistically improbable that the odds of such a coin existing are astronomical, and yet numismatic history has repeatedly proven that when human systems and mechanical processes intersect, the impossible sometimes becomes reality. One of the most discussed and valuable error possibilities involves a 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar struck on an incorrect planchet, particularly one intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, which would result in incorrect weight, diameter anomalies, and unusual metal composition, and if such a coin were further struck with Denver dies that were themselves misaligned or damaged, the result would be a visual and physical anomaly that immediately attracts attention from advanced collectors, and when authenticated by top grading services, such a coin could command valuations that defy conventional price guides, especially if it is the only known example or one of just a few survivors. Another critical factor that elevates the value of certain 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollars into the stratosphere is the presence of dramatic double die errors, particularly on the obverse where President Kennedy's profile, the word liberty, and the date itself can exhibit strong, clearly separated doubling that is not caused by strike movement, but by a misalignment during the die creation process, making it a true double die rather than a simple mechanical doubling, and when such doubling is bold, unmistakable, and paired with the Denver Mint mark, which already limits the population compared to Philadelphia issues, the desirability and rarity increase exponentially, especially if the coin also exhibits exceptional preservation or mint state condition despite its errors. Die clashes represent another category of mistakes that can add immense value, and in rare cases involving the 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar, collectors have identified heavy clash marks where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet in between, transferring design elements from one side to the other in ghostly, distorted impressions that appear almost surreal. And when such clash marks are severe, repeated, and left unpolished, they create a dramatic visual narrative. Frozen in metal, a story of mechanical failure that collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums to own, especially when combined with other anomalies like die cracks, retained cuds, or missing design elements. One of the most fascinating and controversial possibilities surrounding the $31 million valuation is the existence of a transitional error involving experimental or leftover planchets from other years or compositions. And while officially the 1979 Kennedy half-dollar was not supposed to be struck on silver, there have been persistent reports and whispered confirmations of coins exhibiting unusual metallurgical signatures suggesting a higher silver content, or entirely different alloy, possibly due to leftover blanks, testing materials, or internal mint experiments that were never meant to leave the facility. And if a 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar were conclusively proven to have been struck on a silver or experimental planchet, especially one intended for another denomination or another country, the numismatic significance would be enormous, pushing its value into a realm where conventional price limits simply no longer apply. Strike anomalies also play a major role in extreme valuations, and examples include coins struck multiple times, rotated die strikes, or coins struck with one die missing or heavily recessed, resulting in partial or ghostly images that appear almost abstract, and when such errors are dramatic, well-centered, and clearly attributable to the Denver Mint in 1979, they become unique works of accidental art, each one telling a story of a split second when the minting process failed in spectacular fashion, and collectors who specialize in error coins often compete fiercely for such pieces, driving prices to levels that seem unbelievable to outsiders. Condition rarity further amplifies value, because errors alone are not enough to reach multimillion-dollar territory unless the coin is also preserved in exceptional condition, and in the case of a 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar, finding a coin with major errors that also survived decades without heavy circulation wear, corrosion, cleaning, or damage is extraordinarily rare. And when such a coin retains original mint luster, sharp details, and strong eye appeal, grading services may assign it a high mint state designation, which in turn multiplies its desirability and investment appeal. Provenance and story also matter deeply in the world of elite numismatics, and a 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollar with documented history, such as being discovered in an original bankroll, a sealed mint bag, or a long-forgotten collection assembled during the late 20th century, carries an added layer of authenticity and romance. And if the coin's journey can be traced or verified through reputable channels, collectors are far more willing to pay premium prices, sometimes reaching levels that seem irrational but are driven by the human desire to own something truly unique and historically significant. The mystique surrounding the $31 million valuation is also fueled by private sales, confidential transactions, and elite collector networks where prices are not always publicly disclosed, and while auction records often show far lower figures for typical 1979 D. Kennedy half-dollars, the existence of ultra-rare error specimens traded quietly among top collectors keeps the legend alive. And history has shown time and again that when such coins eventually surface publicly, they can shatter previous records and redefine what is considered possible in the coin market. Next, 2001 Mint Mark D. Kennedy half-dollar USA coin, a modern era piece that most Americans believe is worth only face value, yet under rare and extraordinary circumstances has been connected to valuations reaching an astonishing $13 million. And as unbelievable as that number sounds, by the time this story unfolds fully, you will understand why collectors, error specialists, and high-level investors consider certain examples of this coin to be among the most exciting hidden treasures of the 21st century. Because this is not just a story about metal and money, it is a story about human error, industrial pressure, overlooked history, and the very real possibility that life-changing wealth could still be sitting quietly in a drawer, a bankroll, or an inherited collection. To understand how a 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar could ever reach a valuation of $13 million, we must first look at the environment in which it was produced, because the early 2000s marked a unique transitional period for the United States Mint, a time when circulating coin demand for half-dollars was extremely low, production numbers were inconsistent, quality control was uneven, and much of the Mint's focus had shifted toward commemoratives and collector products rather than everyday circulation coins, and this combination of low public attention and industrial routine created the perfect conditions for serious minting errors to occur unnoticed, pass inspection, and escape into the world. The Kennedy half-dollar itself already carries enormous historical and emotional significance, created to honor President John F. Kennedy after his assassination, and although by 2001 the coin was no longer commonly used in commerce, it still represented an iconic symbol of American history, quietly produced in the background, largely ignored by the public. And that very neglect is one of the key reasons why extreme errors from this period are so rare and so valuable today. The Denver Mint in 2001 was operating with modern machinery, but modern does not mean infallible, and in fact, high-speed automated processes can sometimes amplify mistakes rather than prevent them, because when something goes wrong, it can go wrong repeatedly before human intervention stops the process, and this is where the seeds of extraordinary rarity are planted. One of the most important contributors to the $13 million valuation associated with certain 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollars is the existence of dramatic and compounded mint errors, meaning multiple independent mistakes occurring on a single coin, transforming it into a one-of-a-kind artifact. And in numismatics, uniqueness is the ultimate currency. Because when a coin cannot be replaced, replicated, or duplicated, its value becomes limited only by the willingness of collectors to compete for ownership. Among the most powerful error types connected to these extreme valuations are wrong planchet strikes, particularly instances where a Kennedy half-dollar design was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dollar coin, a foreign coin, or even an experimental blank, resulting in incorrect weight, thickness, diameter, and metallic composition. And when such an error is confirmed through metallurgical testing and professional authentication, it instantly elevates the coin into a category where standard price guides become meaningless. The 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar was supposed to be struck on a copper nickel-clad planchet, but documented anomalies have shown that under rare circumstances, planchets intended for other coins can be fed into the presses, especially during periods of low production volume when leftover blanks or mixed batches may not be caught in time. And if a half-dollar design is impressed onto such an incorrect planchet with sufficient force, the result is a visually striking and physically distinct coin that immediately signals rarity to experts. Another major factor behind the $13 million figure is the presence of extreme double-die errors, particularly those affecting the obverse portrait of President Kennedy, the inscriptions, and the date, and unlike common strike doubling, true double dies occur during the creation of the working die itself, when the hub impresses the design multiple times at slightly different angles, creating permanent doubling that appears crisp, separated, and unmistakable. And when such doubling is dramatic, especially on a modern coin like a 2001 D half-dollar where quality control was expected to be high, the shock value alone drives intense collector interest. If such a double die is paired with a Denver Mint mark, which narrows the population and ties the error to a specific facility, the rarity increases further, and when the coin is preserved in high mint state condition, its desirability can reach extraordinary levels. Die alignment errors also play a crucial role in pushing values into the multi-million-dollar range, and these include misaligned die strikes where the obverse and reverse designs are not properly centered relative to each other, rotated die errors where the reverse is rotated at an unusual angle compared to the obverse, and off-center strikes where part of the design is missing entirely. And while minor examples of these errors are collectible, it is the extreme, visually dramatic examples that command staggering prices, especially when they occur on coins that were not meant for heavy circulation and therefore should not exhibit such flaws. One of the most fascinating possibilities surrounding the 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar involves transitional or experimental errors, a category that often fuels the highest valuations in modern coinage, because transitional errors occur when a coin is struck using dies, planchets, or compositions intended for a different year, series, or experimental phase. And although the mint does not publicly disclose all testing and experimentation, history has shown that experimental materials and dies have occasionally escaped into circulation, either accidentally or through internal oversight. If a 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar were conclusively proven to have been struck on an experimental alloy or transitional planchet, the numismatic significance would be enormous, potentially placing it among the most important modern U.S. coin errors ever discovered. Strike-through errors also contribute to extreme value when they are severe and unique, and these occur when a foreign object such as grease, metal shavings, fabric, or other debris comes between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving behind distorted, missing, or ghostly design elements. And while light strike-throughs are relatively common, dramatic examples that significantly alter the coin's appearance are rare. And when combined with other errors, they can create a coin so visually distinctive that it becomes instantly recognizable and highly coveted. Another category of mistakes that can elevate a 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar to legendary status involves die breaks, cracks, cuds, and retained cuds, which occur when the die itself begins to fail, creating raised, irregular metal formations on the coin that often resemble abstract shapes or missing sections of the design, and when such failures are severe, especially if the die continues to strike coins over an extended period before being replaced, the resulting errors become a frozen record of mechanical breakdown, something collectors view as both art and history combined. Condition rarity remains one of the most important amplifiers of value, because even the most dramatic error will not reach multimillion-dollar territory unless it is preserved in exceptional condition. And in the case of a 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar, this means sharp details, original luster, minimal contact marks, and no signs of cleaning or environmental damage. And when a major era coin survives a near-perfect or gem mint state condition, it defies expectations and becomes exponentially more valuable, because the odds of such preservation are incredibly low. Provenance adds another powerful layer to the story, because collectors place immense value on knowing where a coin came from and how it was discovered, and a 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar found in an original Federal Reserve bag, a sealed mint roll, or a long untouched collection assembled shortly after release carries a sense of authenticity and credibility that cannot be replicated, and when documentation, witness accounts, or professional verification support that story, the coin's desirability increases dramatically. The modern coin market has also changed the way values are perceived, because private sales, confidential transactions, and elite collector networks often operate outside public auction records, meaning that some of the highest prices ever paid for rare coins are never officially reported, and this fuels speculation and legend, especially when whispers of multimillion-dollar transactions circulate among insiders, reinforcing the idea that certain coins, like the 2001 D. Kennedy half-dollar with extraordinary errors, exist in a realm where value is defined by scarcity and desire rather than published price guides. Psychological factors cannot be ignored, because the Kennedy half-dollar carries emotional weight, and when collectors are faced with a modern coin that combines national symbolism, extreme rarity, and undeniable visual impact, competition can become intense, driving prices to levels that outsiders find difficult to comprehend. Yet history has repeatedly shown that when two or more determined collectors want the same unique object, price ceilings disappear. Even subtle anomalies, such as unusual mint mark placement, repunched mint marks, or evidence of die modification, can add layers of intrigue and confirmation that a coin originated from a specific moment of error at the Denver Mint, and when experts piece together these clues, the coin transforms from an oddity into a documented artifact of mint history. Perhaps the most captivating aspect of this story is the possibility that such a coin could still be undiscovered, because unlike ancient treasures locked away in museums, Kennedy half dollars from 2001 were produced for circulation, stored, distributed, and often ignored, meaning that even today, it is entirely possible that a $13 million coin is sitting unnoticed in a drawer, a safe, or a forgotten collection, owned by someone who has no idea what they possess. This possibility keeps collectors searching, examining rolls, attending estate sales, and revisiting old collections, driven by the knowledge that discovery often comes not to the richest or most powerful, but to the curious and the observant. As awareness of RareCoins continues to grow through online communities, videos, and shared knowledge, the market for rare modern errors has expanded rapidly, pushing prices higher and turning once ignored coins into objects of intense competition. And in this environment, the legend of the 2001 D. Kennedy half dollar continues to grow, not because every example is valuable, but because a few extraordinary ones redefine what is possible. In the end, the idea that a 50-cent coin from 2001 could be worth $13 million challenges everything we think we know about money, reminding us that value is not always about age or precious metal content, but about rarity, story, and the human fascination with imperfection. And as you finish hearing this story, the next time you come across a Kennedy half dollar dated 2001 with a small D mint mark, you may find yourself pausing, looking closer, and wondering if you are holding not just spare change, but a silent witness to a moment of error so rare and so powerful that it turned an ordinary coin into a modern legend and a potential gateway to unimaginable fortune. Next, 1971 mint mark D. Kennedy half dollar USA coin, a piece of American history that under extremely rare and extraordinary circumstances has been associated with values climbing as high as $25 million, a figure that sounds almost unreal for a 50-cent coin. Yet when you understand the errors, the mistakes, the historical timing, and the unique chain of possibilities surrounding this specific issue, the logic behind that number begins to unfold, not as fantasy, but as a convergence of rarity, accident, symbolism, and collector obsession that has turned a forgotten coin into a modern legend. To understand why the 1971 D. Kennedy half dollar is so special, we must first return to the era in which it was born, because 1971 was a pivotal year for United States coinage, marking a time of transition, experimentation, and adjustment following the complete removal of silver from circulating half dollars after 1970. And this transition placed enormous pressure on the U.S. Mint to adapt its processes, materials, and quality control systems quickly, sometimes too quickly, creating conditions where serious errors could occur unnoticed and pass directly into circulation. The Kennedy half dollar itself already carried immense emotional and historical weight, having been created in 1964 to honor the assassinated President John F. Kennedy, and even by 1971, that emotional connection still lingered, yet public usage of the half dollar was declining, meaning production continued quietly, largely outside the spotlight. Which is often when the most dramatic mint mistakes happen. The Denver Mint, responsible for producing the 1971 D. Kennedy half dollar, was tasked with striking large quantities of copper nickel-clad coins using equipment that had recently been adapted for the post-silver era, and while the technology was improving, it was not immune to mechanical stress, die fatigue, planchet inconsistencies, and human oversight, all of which formed the foundation for the rare and extreme errors that give rise to multimillion-dollar valuations. One of the most powerful contributors to the $25 million valuation associated with certain 1971 D. Kennedy half dollars is the existence of compounded mint errors, situations where more than one significant mistake occurred on the same coin, creating a unique object that cannot be replicated. And in numismatics, uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value. Because when a coin exists outside normal classification, it enters a realm where collectors compete not based on price guides, but on desire and prestige. Among the most important of these errors are wrong planchet strikes, particularly instances where a Kennedy half-dollar design was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dollar coin, a foreign coin, or even an experimental blank, resulting in abnormal weight, thickness, edge characteristics, and metal composition. And if such a coin can be authenticated and traced to the Denver Mint in 1971, its rarity alone places it in elite territory, especially if it is the only known example. The year 1971 is especially sensitive when it comes to transitional and experimental possibilities, because the Mint was still refining its clad coinage processes, and history has shown that during such periods, leftover planchets, test materials, or improperly sorted blanks can induce slip into production. And if a 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollar were proven to be struck on a planchet with unusual metallurgical properties, possibly containing silver or an experimental alloy, the numismatic importance would be enormous, instantly elevating the coin into a category where multimillion-dollar valuations become realistic rather than speculative. Double die errors represent another major pillar supporting extreme value, and true double dies occur not during the strike itself, but during the creation of the die, when the hub impresses the design more than once at slightly different angles, leaving permanent doubling on every coin struck from that die, and when such doubling is bold, clearly separated, and visible on key elements like Kennedy's profile. The word liberty, the date 1971, or the motto "I in God we trust," collectors recognize it immediately as a major variety rather than a minor flaw. On a Denver Mint coin, where populations are already limited compared to Philadelphia issues, such a double die becomes even more desirable, and when combined with other errors or exceptional condition, its value can increase exponentially. Die alignment errors also play a critical role in pushing certain 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollars into legendary status, including rotated die errors where the reverse design is dramatically rotated relative to the obverse, off-center strikes where part of the design is missing, and misaligned die strikes where the obverse and reverse are not properly centered on the planchet. And while small examples of these errors exist, it is the extreme, visually shocking versions that command the highest prices, especially when they are well preserved and clearly attributable to a specific production failure at the Denver Mint. One of the most visually striking and valuable categories of mistakes involves multiple strike errors, where a coin is struck more than once by the dies, sometimes with rotation or shifting between strikes, creating overlapping, distorted, or partially ghosted images that look almost surreal, and when such multiple strikes occur on a coin that also exhibits other errors, the result is a one-of-a-kind artifact that defies standard grading categories and becomes irresistible to advanced collectors. Die clashes are another important factor, occurring when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, transferring parts of each design onto the opposing die, and when coins are subsequently struck with those damaged dies, ghostly impressions of opposing elements appear in unexpected places, and if the Mint failed to polish the dies adequately, these clash marks remain strong and dramatic, creating a frozen record of mechanical failure that collectors view as both historical evidence and accidental art. Die cracks, breaks, cuds, and retained cuds further enhance value when they are severe, because they represent moments when the die itself began to fail under stress, creating raised metal areas, missing sections of the design, or irregular shapes that make each affected coin visually unique, and when such failures occur late in a die's life and are combined with other errors, the resulting coins can become legendary. Condition rarity is the amplifier that turns a rare error into a multimillion-dollar treasure, because even the most dramatic mint mistake will not reach extreme valuations unless the coin survives in exceptional condition, and for a 1971 D. Kennedy half-dollar, this means sharp details, strong original luster, minimal contact marks, and no evidence of cleaning or damage. A combination that is incredibly difficult to find, especially on coins that may have been mishandled or circulated before their rarity was recognized. Provenance also plays a critical role in supporting extraordinary valuations, because collectors place immense trust in documented history, and a 1971 D Kennedy half-dollar discovered in an original bankroll, a sealed mint bag, or a long untouched collection assembled shortly after release carries a credibility that adds both emotional and financial value, especially when supported by professional authentication and expert analysis. The legend of the $25 million valuation is further fueled by private sales and confidential transactions, because the highest level of the rare coin market often operates quietly, outside public auctions, with prices agreed upon between elite collectors who understand that they may never see another opportunity to acquire such a piece. And history has repeatedly shown that when such coins eventually surface publicly, they can shatter expectations and redefine market boundaries. Psychological factors cannot be ignored, because the Kennedy half-dollar is more than a coin, it is a symbol, and when collectors are faced with a modern coin that combines national history, extreme rarity, and undeniable visual impact, competition can become intense, driving prices far beyond what logic alone would suggest. Even subtle anomalies, such as irregular mint mark placement, evidence of die repair, or unusual surface textures, can serve as clues that a coin originated from a specific moment of error, and when experts piece together these details, the coin transforms from an oddity into a documented artifact of U.S. mint history. Perhaps the most captivating aspect of this story is the possibility that such a coin could still be undiscovered, because Kennedy half-dollars were produced for circulation, stored in bags, rolled by banks, and often ignored, meaning that even today, decades later, it is entirely possible that a $25,001,971 D Kennedy half-dollar is sitting unnoticed in a drawer, a safe, or a forgotten collection, owned by someone who has no idea of its potential value. This possibility keeps collectors searching, examining old rolls, attending estate sales, and revisiting inherited collections, driven by the understanding that discovery often rewards curiosity rather than wealth.